Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're talking about the Stormlight Archive. This is the review for the second book, The Ward of Radiance. If you have not read the book or you have not heard of the Stormlight Archive at all, I would highly encourage you to check out my old video on The Way of the King, which is the first book in the series, as this book will contain heavy spoilers for the first and the second book. If you want to know if the Stormlight Archive is worth the read, I would highly suggest it. The Way of the King is probably one of my favorite books I've ever read. Word of Radiance, I didn't enjoy as much, but I think it was a fantastic sequel. And I'll give a full review of the entire storyline up to date, as I believe they're still writing the books for it, once I reach the end. All right, again, this is your last chance. Please go watch the other video if you have not heard about the Stormlight Archive at all. The first book is called The Way of the King. If you just kind of want to go in blind and go and read it, I would recommend it. I think it's a good book if you like the fantasy genre. Okay, at this point, everyone should be gone, so we're going to get into spoilers. So my last video, for the first one, I didn't do almost any spoilers. I tried to be really safe about it. So this one, I'm going to speak a lot more candidly. So for starters, my favorite character was the Queen Sister. And I was pretty disappointed that they got rid of her so early in the book. And then I was even more annoyed they Deus Ex Machina'd her at the end of the book. Now, I'm sure she goes on to be an incredible character in the third book, much like she was an incredible character in the first book. But to have her get quote unquote killed off so early in this book, one of, again, my favorite characters in the entire series thus far. And then just like what was it, like the last like page or something, like the last chapter, they just Deus Ex Machina her back in the middle of nowhere with Wit. Like, bro, come on, dude. Like, I'd already gotten over the fact they killed her off, and then you just brought her back. Like, oh my god, it's even more frustrating to me that they killed her off for the entire book than it would be if they would have just left her dead. Honestly, it was just like, we can't be bothered to progress this character at all, so let's just get rid of her and then bring her back. Now, if you're not like me and you didn't like that character very much, maybe you were happy that that happened, but I would say you're wrong. I know everything's an opinion, but she's awesome, so whatever. Next complaint I would have about this book is I didn't like the pacing. I It felt a bit off. Like, we would have flashback ones, and I get the importance of many of those. Many of those um, were fine. I think some of them were a bit redundant and unnecessary. I think there's quite a few chapters in the book that could have been cut out, and they could have used those pages to expand upon other things that they kind of blitzed through really quickly. But I get flashbacks and their importance. It was more of they would just have random chapters that didn't seem to progress the plot at all. I think a really good example of that is the horse episode. Like, I just felt like I was watching a TV show, and all of a sudden, they're on vacation riding horses. And I was like, what is going on? Why are we here? Did it pay off? Did the character that was learning to ride the horse have like a big dramatic moment later on in the book where like that came into play? No, no, it didn't. Really don't see the point of that chapter at all. You're gonna be like, oh well, it was because they explored the relationship between those two characters and blah blah blah. It was a moment where like the one character respected the other one more because he didn't rat out the other guy. No, man, it was unnecessary. I just feel it was unnecessary. You know, I just there was too much talk of horses. I don't like I didn't really like horses being in the book in the first place, I'm gonna be honest with you. That was the whole one of my favorite parts of the first book was just how alien everything was. Everything was inspired by the ocean. All the plants were weird. All the animals were like crustaceans or insects. Axe hounds, right, aren't dogs. They're like these weird like, I don't know, like centipede looking things. I don't even know how you would describe them. They look like bugs, right? And then they talk about horses, and you would kind of just assume, much like axe hound, that a horse isn't really a horse because an axe hound isn't really a hound. It's, just the word they use to conjure an image, and much like a hound's role in society is to like be a hunting dog and a companion. That's how, you would just assume they use the word horse so you can kind of visualize the use of it. But no, it's just a regular horse. And then they even included other mammals. And I get that they come from another region, and that the region that this is taking place in doesn't have many of them, and it's kind of a rarity and all that. But I still thought it was much cooler when everything was non mammalian, and it was kind of a nice break because most fantasy, I think, just uses real animals and is very inspired by like medieval Europe. And it was kind of interesting to have something that was still familiar, being the ocean, it was still rather familiar. So you could still get your head around it, but it was on land and it was the main kind of setting. And I thought that was really interesting. And I was kind of disappointed to see more of a departure from that in the second book. Now, I will say that I thought for sure, based on how slow the pacing was in the middle there, that they were going to do a cliffhanger, that they were going to build up to the countdown ending, and the thing was going to happen, and that was going to be the end of the book, and it was going to be like a cliffhanger, right? And I will give credit that there was a lot more closure than I thought there was going to be through reading the book. Again, that was one of the things I praised the book for the first time, was I thought there was a reasonable amount of closure for the first book, and I think there was also a reasonable amount of closure for the second book, which is also very rare to see in a multi-book series, to have closure like that in between chapters. And again, I will say that that was really good. That's why I really liked this series in the first place, was the fact that they didn't try to sucker you in. I feel they did a good job on that regard. But I do feel that the last bit of the book, I would say the last 300 pages of the book, seemed a bit rushed. It seemed like the pacing just was like breakneck, you know? Like we're on the horse episode, or we're like hanging out, we're doing all these flashbacks and stuff, and they have like 30 days left. And it just seems like suddenly like it's the week of. And yeah, I just feel like not much occurred in the gap period. And I don't know. I think I would just sped it up a bit. I imagine a lot of the stuff I'm complaining about will have payoff in the next book or the book after that. Hopefully, the next book, and I'll be proven wrong. Maybe like some of the things I thought were really unnecessary, some of the plot lines I really didn't feel like went anywhere, might actually go somewhere in the next book. And all the people in the comments are the people watching this video that are like, "You're an idiot. You'll see next book," and you might be right. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I thought the Barshindi was really cool. I thought exploring them and their culture in the beginning of the book was super cool. I thought them not being these kind of like mindless, this mindless enemy, and them being kind of a compassionate um, enemy. I really like that in writing a lot. I love it when you can sympathize with the villains, and they did an incredibly good job of that. And then they got rid of it, kind of. I mean, I know they're alluding that they're trapped in their own bodies, and that's why she can hear the screaming when she does the one song or whatever. She can always hear the screaming because the real person's still trapped in there. But when it was more of just a group of people that were basically enslaved by their old gods, and even though we couldn't really understand why they murdered Galinar in the first book, uh, having that kind of perspective in the second book early on, I thought was really cool. And I was a little disappointed that they decided to basically have them all be brainwashed by the Red Spren, the whatever the dude's name is, the angry cloud. So that was also kind of disappointing for me. Hopefully, and then I mean, obviously not all of them got turned yet, right? At the end of the book, the storm hasn't gone through and turned all the Harshmen into the storm boys, storm form. They haven't, their minds haven't been taken over. Although you would think that Shen, who he changed his name, but I'm awful with names, so I'm just gonna remember the first one. He was there when they conjured the storm, so it wouldn't have. they've turned if the storm forces them into the new state because they definitely were there during the storm. I'm pretty sure that they had them in the new little town they went to. Maybe they didn't write anything about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering. I read all of it kind of in a short time frame, so some of it's kind of mushed together. So I might be mistaken on that point. But yeah, I just also, man, at the end they just were like, "Hey, yeah, uh, Dalinar, you are now a radiant to be or whatever." He's not fully radiant yet, but you know what I mean. And then fucking his son also just like he's a truth watcher and he's been so the entire time, and they just like just chuck you on it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's why he stopped at that one fight was because he could hear the screams." That's it. That's yep. You're just like, "Huh? What?" You're like, when did this happen? Has he been one the entire time? Why isn't this like again, in the next book, they'll explore it and watch. They'll be like, "Oh, well, the reason why he plays with that little box is because the box is the sprint or some crap like that." And they're gonna add little details that they mentioned in the previous 2 books to make it seem more legit. But I just thought it was so far out of left field, especially because in the little interludes, right, they would explore other ones. Like, they explored that, like, little, thief girl who could, make herself frictionless and all that. That was fine. That was cool. They coulda just done one about him. Like, they coulda just done one of the interludes towards the end of the book before that kinda reveal, the last, interlude before part 5. They coulda just had it they could have even left it where you don't know the person's name, right? You don't truly know who it is, but it's just like a member of, um, Bridge 5 or sorry, Bridge 4. They coulda just left it really vague also where you didn't know the name or who was speaking, but it was like a scene about, um, this soldier in Dalinar's army whom, was struggling with this and, like, was having these issues and could see the spirit or the spren and didn't, like, tell anyone, and you then the reveal would be there when he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm also one. I'm a truth watcher." And you're like, "Oh, shit, that interlude that we didn't know who it was, but we knew it was just someone in Dalinar's army was about him, and he's actually the one." That would've been cool. They coulda done that. You coulda just thought it was, like, maybe some random bridgeman or something, and they didn't say the name in that chapter, and it could've, it could've been fine. That could've been a way of doing it. I just felt like just giving you 2 out of nowhere. Come on, come on. But despite all my complaining, I am buying the next book, and I am hooked, and it is probably one of the better fantasy series I have read. I just, I wanna complain. I'm not super into, the Lightweaver. Not super into her character, honestly. Uh, she's okay. I thought the whole bit where she was hanging out with the con artist kinda lame. I didn't like that section very much of it. Obviously, her mentor is my favorite character in the book, so last book I was loved all of her chapters because they included my favorite character. But soon it was just kind of her without what I'm not quite sure how to pronounce all these freaking fantasy names, so I'm just not gonna bother. Without her instructor, and then she was hanging out with that con artist. I just it was okay. It was okay. I get why they did all the ghost blood stuff because it helped you understand the motivations of the king who's killing people, as well as the motivations of the guy who sold Kaladin into slavery. That guy, but yeah, I just felt like the con artist section didn't really have much of a payoff. Like I get that was the introduction to the Ghost Bloods, but she already knew about them, right? She already knew about them quite a lot already. Hopefully they do more with her. Hopefully her powers get cooler. Right now she just has a shard blade and she can make illusions. I do think the illusion magic is cool. Illusions are like one of my favorite things in D&D, for example. I think illusion magic is super cool. Mesmer is not the class I play in Guild Wars 2, but Mesmer is one of the cooler classes in Guild Wars 2 conceptually. So I think she has a lot of potential. I think there's a lot you could do with that character, a lot of really cool use of illusions. that could be explored further in the next books. I think how they used them previously in this book were pretty cool. I think they had some really kind of fun uses of it, especially when they do anything like walls to cover up, things like turning it into a shadow, and then when they had the spren patterns with the illusion on top of them to make it move. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. I think they're, basically taking silent image and doing the best they can with it. And I think it's a really funny or fun way of using it. I think the gravity powers are super cool as well that Kaladin and Seth have. We don't know what Dalinar's abilities are yet, so we'll see. Apparently, he has a one of those fancy blades, the ones that give you powers just for having it binded to you. Obviously, he stopped using it, but they have two of the fancy blades that basically just make you a radiant light. You have the magic, but you don't have the sprint. They didn't do anything with that. They were like, "Oh yeah, here's you got one of them," and then they didn't use any of the powers from it, which I thought was kind of lame. They obviously were foreshadowing that one of the honor blades went missing, and then they didn't. I don't really feel like there was a payoff for that, and he binded the blade and everything, and it's just like, whatever. I do think the way they described the blades changing in that fighting scene towards the end was really cool, really innovative. I really don't You really don't think about, like, how fighting would change and that your style would change if you could, like, switch from a different styles of weapons. But the way that was kinda described was rather interesting and fun. I also didn't like how they killed off the main antagonist, kind of unceremoniously at the end of the book. I would say that character was the main antagonist for probably the first book and the second book. Yes, I know the Parshendi are there, and you could argue that the Parshendi are the main antagonists because they're the ones that brought back the evil god. But for the sake of like Kaladin obviously hates him, right? Dalinar was obviously betrayed by him, and he was a foil to Dalinar much of the first book, even before the betrayal and all that, right? So it just seemed like a really unceremonious end. Now, am I surprised it went that way? Like if it was real, would I be surprised that they just murdered him like that? No, but I would have expected, I don't know, something a little more grandiose from a character like that. They built him up to be this schemer and all this, and then him just get got like a chump. This seemed I don't know, a bit out of left field. I was just a bit surprised that that came on the way it did. But yeah, that's enough me complaining about the book. Again, I did like the book. Uh, I don't want you to think that because I am talking smack about the things I didn't like, doesn't mean I didn't like the book as a whole. I think some of the characters are fairly well written. I don't necessarily agree with all of the problems they have, but I do feel like a lot of what they explore is rather human despite the fantasy setting. I think the writer does a really good job at bringing closure in between and kind of having somewhat complete arcs that come to a logical conclusion, and then they don't leave too many open threads for you to like really worry about, but they also don't like end the story completely, so that way like the next book they can bring it back and it's still a building story while it's still being somewhat satisfying to get to that point in the first place. Yeah, that's enough me whinging about Words of Radiance. I'll be back in a month or two to whinge about Oathbringer, complain about the things I didn't like about that one, and then tell you to buy the books anyways in the beginning of the video, right? It seems a bit hypocritical, but I do like the books, and I don't think having criticism about something means that you don't like it. So I can complain about the little things I don't like, and the fact that I was able to fit all my complaints in under 20 minutes means there's not really too much to complain about. I definitely would give the book maybe like a 7 out of 10. I give the first one an 8 out of 10. Um, Both are very good, way above average. Definitely worth the time and the read. Our local librarian said that this was her favorite book of all time. So hopefully she doesn't see this video, or I probably won't be allowed to ever check out a library book ever again. But thank you for watching. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.